What's up, guys? This is Pete, aka Characters, and welcome back to the Carrot Poker Podcast. Thank you so much for all of you that have been getting in touch just with feedback about the podcast in general, and any of you that have contacted me for coaching purposes due to watching the podcast. I really appreciate you guys reaching out to me. I'm going to continue with some hands from the corner today. First of all, a quick apology. If you're tuning into this podcast on a weekly basis, there are times when it doesn't come out. And this is something that I just don't think is good enough anymore. I think this podcast needs to come out every week because you guys expect it. You want to get your fix of hand review. You want to hear me talk about a hand. You've probably got a time in your week that you fit the podcast in if you're an avid listener who likes the podcast. So I don't think it's fair to you guys that it only comes out like usually once a week, but sometimes every 2 weeks or whatever. So I'm going to endeavour to try and change that and make it come out towards the end of the week, every week, instead of just when I manage to fit it in. Now, my time is fairly limited, but nowhere near like so limited that I can't achieve that. So definitely no more excuses and no more failing to get this out on a weekly basis, because I think you guys deserve it for all the kind of effort you give me, like giving me feedback and all that kind of thing. So anyway, expect this to come out weekly from now on. And if I fail, I don't know, I'm gonna have to set something up, like start shipping all you guys like $100 every time or something. Maybe not quite that extreme, because I'd maybe get bankrupt pretty quickly depending on how many listeners I actually have, which I'm not too sure of, but probably enough that it would hurt significantly, dent my bankroll. But anyway, maybe I can give you guys slightly less money when I fail to do that. I did that once actually when I was inspiring myself to like play more poker back in the day when I played like full-time professional poker, and I had a thread on a site called Flop Turn River back in the day, and it was called like Carrots Gets Out of Bed or something like that. And if I didn't get out of bed by a certain time, because I used to be really lazy, man, like sleeping in every morning and like leave my sessions till the afternoon, then I'd get less volume in at the end of the month and it would just snowball. And so like I would ship the first person in the thread who posted each day $60 if I didn't actually go online and post. And it worked really well for a few weeks until the younger, irresponsible version of myself started getting out of bed, making the post, and then just going straight back to bed in the modern era where iPhones exist. And everyone can just log onto a forum on their phone. It would have worked even less well. So I need a better mechanism than that, evidently. Hopefully the more mature me should be easier to motivate. You would think so, having written a book and had the discipline to do that. I could churn out a podcast every week, so let's endeavour to do that. We've got a hand today from one of my members where it shouldn't take us too long. I'm going to make this about 15 minutes as I have a coaching session to do pretty soon, and I think this is a hand that we can easily analyse in 15 minutes as long as we don't get too sidetracked with rambling, which is always something that can happen in my podcast, as you guys know, but hopefully it's entertaining rambling at least, more than half of the time or something like that, plus EV rambling. But we'll avoid it as much as possible today and just get straight into the hand. So in this spot, it's 5-L, and this is a student whose hands I don't think I've reviewed before on the podcast. I'm always trying to make sure that I review hands from different students in Carrot Corner. And by the way, Carrot Corner is the place to come if you get coached from me. It's the place you'll end up, and it's also a place you can join if you want like really good structured hand review, poker discussion community and support from a bunch of my moderators, myself and my other students. There are about 80 members now on the site, so 83 to be precise. So we're building up towards that big 100, and we're going to have a little celebration when that happens. So in this hand, hero is the button. Cutoff is a shorter stacked player, 81.2 big blind. So the first thing that you should note about Cutoff is that he is probably a weaker player, because it's just not very often that a reg, especially in PokerStars 5-L Zoom, where there's auto top-up available, and every reg knows that, is going to be, short or stacked by 19.8 big blinds. It's just not very common. So Cutoff opens to 2 big blinds. Again, another indication that this player is certainly a weaker recreational player, because a reg in the cutoff at 5-L should not open to 2 big blinds. It's just too much value to building pots in position where you're not getting 3-bet that much, targeting fish in the blinds, that kind of thing. And there is a fish in the small blind here as well, who's 78.6 big blinds deep. So what's going to happen here is that Hero's going to flat on the button with pocket fives, 5 of spades, 5 of diamonds, which I think is pretty sensible. You're getting a great price. There's not too much to gain by isolating here. You've got 1 fish in the blinds already, which vastly decreases the likelihood that you're going to get squeezed. So this flat is just very plus EV. Remember that your implied odds pre-flop are not just determined by how much you expect to win. They are a function of your price to make the call, to actually see the flop, compared with how much you think you can win on average. So, apologies for the squeaky chair. This was pointed out to me in a Deuces Cracked video that I did recently. I will get a new chair. This one's kind of comfy, but it is just too noisy now. It's getting noisier by the day. So sorry about that, but bear with me. So basically, yeah, there's no reason not to flat here. The implied odds are there because of the good price and the decent potential for getting paid off. Like both of these players, like small blind and cutoff, are shorter stacked, but they're still like 80 BBs deep, roughly 78.6 and 81.2. So they're like way deep enough for us to be able to flat here like super profitably, because we are still going to make a lot of money. And being in position helps us extract value post-flop, and that's another integral part of the puzzle that helps us work out how good our implied odds are. Now, you don't need to work out how good they are precisely. That's impossible, because we don't know like villains' tendencies post-flop and how likely they are to spew off with certain parts of their range or whatever. But we can say like pretty likely to invest a lot of money post-flop with large parts of their ranges. There's 2 of them if the small blind does come along. And so pocket fives for like a $2 and 2 big blind investment is going to be like very fantastic here. So hero flats, and unfortunately the fish in the small blind folds, and a pesky reg, or it looks like a reg at least, in the big blind comes along. So hero's thoughts at this point. We'll just skip into hero's thought process as well, just to make sure that's solid, as we usually do. So he says, villain only min opens from the cutoff, so I think flatting 5-5 is profitable due to being in position, getting good implied odds. Can't see a good reason for 3-bet. We're letting the blinds come along for better odds, as we're only playing this hand for ... making sets. The more players, the better. Exactly, yeah. Villain is also likely to continue with hands that are crushing this. Yes, that is true, and I guess what you mean by that is, oh right, you mean that if we 3-bet, Villain's going to continue with hands that are crushing this. Well, yeah, I mean, you're not going to get Villain, a fishy player, to fold many hands worse than pocket fives, better than pocket fives, sorry, and, he just won't fold anything at all, and pocket fives just plays really, really badly when you've bloated the pot and you're forced to, like, make c-bets with 2 outs when called, and have underpairs all the time, basically. If you're going to play no set, no bet, fit or fold, etc., you want to keep the pot as small as possible to achieve that end and make that higher EV for yourself. So, on the flop, what happens here is that we flop a set. Hand would be rather uninteresting if we didn't, right? Probably wouldn't have made it into the form, so that's almost a given. Probably just playing very straightforwardly in a 3-way pot, and maybe stabbing if we think the villain's really passive or something like that, and we think we can protect our equity and take the pot down a lot without a set. But otherwise, if we hadn't flopped the set here, someone bets we'd be folding. So given that we have flopped the set, that's not the case. We're obviously going to continue. The board is Queen, Jack, 5 with 2 hearts. We have the 5 of spades and the 5 of diamonds, and the 5 on board is the 5 of clubs. The Queen and Jack have both hearts. So big blind checks kind of procedurally, although I would definitely have a donking range, a leading range, I would say. I wouldn't even call it donking because we're 3-way. The reason I don't like the term donking for 3-way leads is that the concept of initiative is kind of less important. There's not just 2 players, one with a capped range and one with an uncapped range. There's 3 players, which means that the pre-flop raiser and the cutoff here will not be c-betting as much as he would be in a heads-up pot. He'll have a stronger range, and therefore check calling by hero is just worse. Also, hero wants to protect his equity with more of his own range. So on Queen, Jack, 5 two-tone, there's a lot of stuff that hero has there that's vulnerable, like a pair of queens or whatever. So just leading with top pairs, leading with like gut shots and flush draws and things like that, and sets and 2 pairs should be like totally fine for big blind here. But big blind does check, and cutoff bets 4 into 6.4. Now hero at this point raises to 14 big blind, so he makes a rather large flop raise in position. First thing I'd say about this flop raise is that on a drier board this would be like pretty terrible, because there's no urgency of value, and you may as well let the big blind come along as well with like 1 pair. Like, don't make him fold like 1 pair or a gut shot, because those hands don't have enough equity to like call profitably against you and are making a mistake if they were to see your cards by calling, which of course they're not. So it's how they play against your range that actually determines if they make a mistake in reality. But you know what I mean, they'd be making a mistake with the cards flipped over, which is of course a good thing for hero. So letting big blind continue here is kind of not that important in this spot, because for one, big blind might be leading like good hands himself, and he may not have something that hero should be worried about folding out here all that often, because the board is wet. I think big blind, most competent big blinds would have a leading range, but this is 5NL. Zoom, no offense to you guys that play that stake, most regs are not competent by my definition of competent, which means having a clue what the hell you're doing. So please don't be offended by that. If you don't have a clue what you're doing, I mean, you'll have some idea, but you might fall into that category, and it just means you need to get better. It's not me like berating anyone. So yeah, man, don't take it so personally. That's all. Like, people are bad at these stakes. That's why people can ascend through and get to higher stakes. So, I mean, big blind may or may not have a leading range. We don't know. It depends on population reads. I don't know. Maybe like half the regs lead here and half don't, whereas like 100 NL, they'd all have a leading range. I don't know, something like that. But in any case, I think that partially discounts us wanting to keep big blind in the pot. The other reason why we don't really like flatting here is that there are a lot of turn cards that do put fives under a lot of pressure, like a set of fives, like any heart, 10, king, 9, that kind of thing, just creates a situation where our hand is no longer like the nutted or very close to nutted thing that it is on this texture. And so that's obviously bad for us, and we don't really want to allow that to happen. The board is wet enough that I would say that value is urgent. Our purposes are now like trying to get value sooner rather than later, and raising here makes a lot of sense. Going 14 big blinds might be a bit big. It's definitely overkill in terms of getting the stacks in, and if villain does have a hand like some kind of draw or something like that, he's still flatting out of position. We can still control the pot on the turn, so villain's implied odds for like calling us here with a flush draw are not great, given that that he's out of position to us, and a flush draw is not a very big part of his range. He's way more likely to hold like kings, aces, ace queen, king queen, queen jack, a set, that kind of thing. Like that range combined, obviously, don't mean he's more likely to have a set than a flush draw. I just mean that relative to the non-flush draws in villain's range, the flush draws are a pretty small, insignificant part of that range. So anyway, like the raises may be a bit big here because you do still want villain to continue. You don't want to like make him fold like bad hands like Jack X or whatever. So I think the raise could be a little smaller, like 12 big blinds, but it's not really a huge deal, to be honest. Like the EV between making it 14 here and making it 12 is going to be pretty negligible. That difference is not going to matter much. So Hero's fine here with this line. I mean, it's definitely, I agree with the flop raise 100%. Big blind folds, which he will anyway, even if Hero calls. And like I say, Hero probably gains less than he loses if he makes big blind actually continue here with like a bunch of draws. So making big blind fold a hand that could easily profitably call for the 4 big blind bet is definitely a good idea. So Hero raising to 14 here for protection makes a lot of sense. Cutoff calls. Okay, good, that kind of goes to plan. And then the turn is one of the turns we didn't want to see, but it's not the worst turn in the world. It's the 10 of diamonds. But before we look at that turn spot, I'm going to just look at Hero's flop explanation and just make sure that his logic is sound on the flop, because that's obviously important. So Hero's been very thorough with his analysis here, which is very good, and it ensures that he will get most out of posting this hand. And he says, on the flop, we make our set and villain decides to c-bet this semi-wet board. Accurate so far. It's likely that villain's opening range will connect well with this flop, making top pairs, 2 pairs, Broadway draws, as well as sets and pairs of backdoor draws. This is true. I decide to raise straight away to get value from all the top pair, 2 pair hands before the board gets any wetter and we lose value on bad turns and rivers. That's also solid. Good job. We also get to charge the draws and reevaluate our hand on further streets. Yeah, I mean, you don't really want to just let a big blind peel like a random draw profitably for 4 big blinds, so that's also true. The big blinds range is likely very wide, so we shouldn't be too concerned about him coming over the top. No, we shouldn't, and like, it's not so much that, it's more that how concerned should you be about blowing him out the pot and costing yourself value. And like I said before, not very, because he should lead a lot of his good hands anyway, and you're not going to like make a lot of money just by getting him to call one more flop bet, and there's a lot of bad turns, so yeah. He then goes on to say, I think if villain 3 bets, we should be happy to get it in. Yeah, I agree with that, because even though we are crushed by oversets, as Hero notes here, we can still get value from 2 pairs and combo draws, which Hero also notes. But put it this way as well, a fish will have a very depolarized kind of 3-bet range, and it'll contain hands that he should just never be 3-betting, like over pairs and ace queen sometimes and stuff like that as well. And even draws. So yeah, so I think that like we have more than enough equity against the fish's range. So the only player that I could ever be like queasy about getting that hand in against facing a 3-bet would be like a complete nit. When villain calls, he goes on to say, I think we can take sets and 2 pairs out of his range, as he would be unlikely to want to slow play on this board texture. Don't take them out completely, like you don't know that. I mean, he's less likely to slow play on this board texture, but you don't know how he thinks, so don't go too absolute with that read. Just discount them. It's not going to matter anyway. Like your plan here is going to be like jam all the money in on good turns and rivers, so whether or not he has these hands is not super important, but don't completely discount them just for practice's sake. So villain likely has a big draw or top pair with the ace of hearts. I mean, that's just too specific. Like, why does he have to have the ace of hearts when he calls with top pair? Why can't he just have any top pair? He's a fish. Don't like randomly make conclusions that just limit villain's range in a way that you cannot justify in the slightest. Sorry to sound harsh there to our member, who's done a very good job of explaining his thoughts. But that's why you explain your thoughts, because some of them, even though your play's fine, will be really bad thoughts, like, you know, villain's range is as specific as only top pair when he has the ace of hearts or a big draw. He can just have a flush draw, an open-ended straight draw, or just top pair. Don't like give this fish credit for like making folds with those kind of with like top pair without a backdoor flush draw. Does the fish even care that he has a backdoor flush draw when he has top pair? No, he doesn't think like that. Anyway, onto the turn. So the turn is, like I say, the 10 of diamonds. So the board is now Queen of Hearts, Jack of Hearts, 5 of clubs, 10 of diamonds. Cutoff checks. Hero bets 24 into 34.4. This is big blinds, by the way. 5 but it's in big blinds. I definitely agree with this. Like, Ace King is not a massive part of villain's range. You will get fish that are bad enough to flat Ace King to your big flop raise out of position, just with a gut shot. That can happen. But it's not something you need to worry about. Yes, it's 16 combos, but they're massively discounted anyway, so not really a big deal. So betting this turn to then shove river is still good, because villain can have even more 2-pair now. The 8-9 and Ace King combos that he does have are not such a massive part of his range. I doubt he has like 8-9 off, to be honest, but he could do. So 8-9 suited's 4 combos, Ace King's 16, that's 20 combos, okay, but you need to discount the 16 Ace Kings down to about 4 or something when he calls a big flop raise out of position. So not massive hands that beat us. Not too thin to bet this turn against a fish, because pair plus draw is a huge part of his range, like Ace Queen, like King 10, Queen, King Queen, that kind of stuff. There's lots of those kind of hands in villain's range. So hero bets nice and big to set up the river shove, which is perfect. Cutoff calls. His turn reasoning here real quick. He says, not the worst of turn cards for us, does make Ace King a straight, but unlikely to have got there with that hand unless he has the Ace of Hearts. Again, with this Ace of Hearts stuff, like, why are fish so much more likely to call the flop when they have the Ace of Hearts with their gut shot? They're not. Like, forget that. That's like backdoor draws are important when you're selecting your floats and bluffs and things like that. Like, they're quite crucial when it comes to actually deciding which hands to do X with and which to do Y with, like give yourself more solid frequencies. But it's not relevant when it comes to like a fish's decision making. Like, some fish will grossly overvalue a backdoor flush draw, but most won't. Most won't even think about it. He then goes on to say, also makes 9-8 a straight, but that hand should also be unlikely unless it's specifically 9-8 of hearts. Yeah, I don't think it's I think that's solid, because 9-8 shouldn't be calling the flop being just a gut shot. I mean, some fish will do it, but it's unlikely. He says, I think we can still get value from enough of his range at this point to continue betting, and I think we can bet quite big. So I bet around 75% of the pot, which sets up around half pot betting the river. This is awesome, because pair plus draw is probably never folding the turn, but it could fold the river if you go too small in the turn and not commit it enough by the river. He then says, this could be higher. I think this could be higher still, maybe around 90% pot. I mean, you don't also want to like start making villain fold parts of his range like pair of queens with no draw either. So just, I think your sizing is perfect here. When villain calls, I think we can take out the straights of Ace King and Ace 9 completely. Again, you're making assumptions you can't justify. Villain could easily slow play Ace King on this turn if he did have it. You can't take that out. It's just too much of an assumption, as they would likely want to get it all in to avoid a bad river. This is just you projecting your thought onto a random fish. That's something you need to watch out for. Okay, onto the river, and I'm going to wrap up pretty soon. King of clubs, worst river ever. Board now reads Queen of Hearts, Jack of Hearts, 5 of clubs, 10 of diamonds, King of clubs, Queen Jack, 10 King. Any ace is a straight, any 9 is a straight, cutoff jams, all in for the half pot bet we left, and we fold. Good. Cannot call here. There are some higher sets, but it's mostly just random ace X, like Ace Jack, Ace Queen, Ace 10, etc. that you're going to see here, even Ace King, which you can't take out of his range, so definitely a good fold. Well played. Hero's reasoning. At the time, I thought this was a terrible river card, but going back to review the hand, I'm not sure just how many aces or 9s get to this point. Don't overthink this, there's loads of them. There's like Ace Queen, there's Ace Jack, this is a fish. Don't give him credit for playing his range in this very specific way that you would play your range. This is where you're going wrong in this hand. Maybe Ace of Hearts, Queen X, potentially again. Ace of Hearts is kind of redundant. Like I said before, the backdoor draw doesn't really matter. I can't see many 9-9s getting to this point. Well, yeah, probably not. He doesn't have 9-9, but he just has Ace X enough, you know, and he's just jammed. Like, is he really just jamming 2-pair? Like, it is possible. You do only need, he says, I think in hindsight, needing to be right 33%. Well, that's not accurate. You need to be right 25% because you're facing a half pot shove, which I think was corrected in the comments, which we're not going to get onto today, but never mind. Still, like, 25% equity is not that easy to have on a board where villain is less likely to shove 2-pair here and any ace makes a straight. I think it's not miles away from a call, but I think folding bottom set here is going to be okay. Like, there are some combos of 2-pair you do need to worry about villain just being like, oh, I'm pot committed, what the hell, I shove. Such as, like, well, any 2-pair really, like Queen 10, King Queen would be the main ones, but it's not even out of the realms of possibility. He does have Jack 10 or King Jack, but I think folding should be fine. Like, you should have maybe just under 25% equity here. Like, it's kind of close. If you did need 33% because the villain potted it, it would be a snap fold for sure. Okay, that's my analysis of that hand. Hero did a good job with his thoroughness there. and basically had the right thoughts to lead to the right action. The mistakes he did make didn't actually affect his line, but they could have in another spot, and that's why it's important to actually assess the thought process. So even though it didn't cost Hero there, it could have in another situation, and we want to try and, cut back on the future situations that Hero's going to go wrong in, because they're going to cost him money and, just lead to lower EV plays being made. Anyway, guys, this has been Characters for the Carrot Poker Podcast. If you want to get in touch, admin@carrotcorner.com is my email address. My website is carrotcorner.com, where all my coaching stuff is. Give me a shout if you want to work with me. I'm still taking on students. Until then, until I hear from you guys, I'll see you in the next podcast, and run good. Keep improving your game. Good luck at the tables. See you later. Thanks for listening.